expansion's happening pretty rapidly. We're getting probably 2 inches into the block before it's really starting to open up, and you can see that wound cavity start to definitely expand, right? And then, probably 4 inches in, we're at about the widest point, and then the bullet starts to fold back on itself.
All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Cartridge Talks Fully Loaded. This is the 308 versus 30-06 ballistic gel breakdown. Across from me, my cohort, Mr. Ryan Muckenhirn. Ryan.
Marco.
Before we dive in to the 308 30-06, at press time, we recently launched 308 versus 6.5 Creed.
Yes.
A lot of feedback, a lot of comments, a lot of views. Those are all very positive things. And I'd say the comments themselves, overwhelmingly positives.
Yes.
A few, I don't know. I mean, it was actually, I wouldn't even call them negatives necessarily. Valid feedback.
Yes.
Thoughtful.
Yep.
I guess not unwarranted, or maybe that's not the word. But anyway, look, we want to do a little housekeeping and maybe provide some of the thought process behind the how and why, or maybe the more of the why behind the way we conducted some of these things.
Sure.
Because we like the feedback, and then we want to address it.
Absolutely. It's a nice quality control check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also like some other great ideas in there as well.
Absolutely. Oh, we had a fun brainstorm.
Yeah, I printed off a few here just to remind me about what we want to talk about.
Sure.
Here.
I want to talk about energy first and foremost.
Yeah, something we didn't factor into our assessment.
Was it a curious omission? Was it intentional? Was it absent-minded?
Yeah, could be any of those things, right?
Well, so energy is kind of a tricky devil because I think for a long time a lot of folks have assessed the merit of a cartridge, a rifle, loading on what kind of energy numbers it's had. And I've played both sides of this fence. Early on in my basement ballistics, that was my obsession, is how much energy does that thing have?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an invalid metric, but it also leaves a little bit on the table.
I was going to say, it's something I definitely look at.
Sure. Energy is a vitally important thing in the terminal package, right? You need energy in order to break bone, punch through hide, drive through tissue. Hydrostatic shock is something that we've talked about before to generate that impulse through the body cavity. How that energy is delivered is the very tricky part. And so a short bit on energy. We're going to talk about energy today because you guys asked for it. Before us, the gelatin blocks that we have here, we have a 308 Winchester and we have a 30-06. We have 150 grain power shock and 180 grain power shock. We'll get to that bullet discrepancy in a little bit. Muzzle energy out of the 308, 2,648 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Out of your 30-06, it's going to be somewhere in the 2,900s, I speculate.
Let me at the muzzle 2913.
2913, right? So energy is a function of mass and velocity. The 30-06 shoots heavier bullets faster. It's going to generate more energy. Now, mass and velocity. So if this was a 150 full metal jacket, I would hit that target with the exact same energy, right? Mm-hmm. All things equal. Because of that bullet's construction, that's wasted airspace, right? That bullet's not going to deposit or impart that energy the same way that a soft point bullet would. And it's very difficult to necessarily quantify what is the best way that energy is deposited. Is all the energy dumping into the target the best solution? And I suppose it depends. Depends on what we hit, how we hit it, where we hit it. So we left energy.
What you're hitting.
Correct. We left energy off the table. I'll tell you a story. This is an embarrassing one, but it paints a picture for me. One of the worst shots I've ever made on a game animal was one of the smallest big game species that you can hunt in North America with one of the biggest centerfire rifles I own. And it was a pronghorn antelope with a 300 Weatherby. How's that for a disparity? I made a very poor shot. and I hit that thing with all kinds of energy. And you know what happened? I had to shoot it several more times.
Yeah.
The first shot was rotten. The subsequent shots were rock solid, and it would not have reacted like the younger version of myself. And I knew better at that point in time. It did not react the way that I thought that high 3,000s foot-pounds of energy put into a critter that weighs 110 pounds soaking wet would have behaved. I would have thought, it would have picked it up like in the movies and thrown it across the room. Didn't happen. Hard lesson learned for me. That's why I stepped back from big rifles that are hard to control during a recoil impulse. So my bad. Felt rotten about it. Paid the price for it. Weighs on my heart and head to this day. I've switched to smaller, more efficient, and controllable cartridges. Increased my efficacy as a shooter, which is why I'm a big fan of cartridges like 308 and 6.5 Creedmoor. Left energy off the table, selected proper bullets, proper bullet placement, which is really important. That's where everything went sideways. And yeah, the rest is history. So energy aside, we left it off because there's a lot to talk about energy. And I could make a cartridge look really good, depending on what its energy calculation is. But there's a lot hanging on that, right? A ton of different variables in that. Bullet style, bullet placement. It's important, but it's not the important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% think it's a factor worth noting, but there's, like with a lot of things, there's caveats that come with it, right?
Yep. And so we did put a precedence on penetration because I think penetration's pretty important.
Well, and I do as well. Now, another person commented, which the comment does not make sense. They're like, well, yeah, you put a precedence on penetration. You could shoot a Full Metal Jacket bullet and get quite impressive penetration.
In fact.
And they're right.
Yes.
But again, that's kind of where some of these, I guess, you got to caveat it a little bit there.
Yeah, in my ideal world, the bullet is intelligent enough to know the facement of the animal or the direction it's pointed. Like if I had a perfect solution, broadside shot, that bullet would go in, it would expand massively, destroy everything inside the thoracic cavity, and give me an exit hole so that I have leakage in case that animal takes off. And then if my shot was quartering on or quartering away, or full frontal, that bullet would know, and it would go through the length of it. I would still have this cataclysmic explosion on the inside and then an exit so that I would have leakage on both sides. Bullets don't do that, so I err on the side of give me a bullet that's going to drive through as much tissue as possible, regardless of my angle. That's my play, and then I shoot for structure.
Yeah, I mean that's I guess that's the philosophy I subscribe to as well. And there was a fair amount of comments. The average chest cavity of your white-tailed deer to your elk is X amount of inches wide, and it's like, yes, that's true, but again, at least for myself, I like to take into account, and people are like, there some people applied the word ethical to it. An ethical shot, would be like a slightly quartering away. I don't know. I don't consider myself an unethical shooter, but if I'm confident in my shot, I will take a hard quartering angle, and I want a bullet that will accommodate those hard quartering angles.
Yep, absolutely.
And I've taken some hard quartering shots, both quartering to and quartering away, with high-powered rifles, 300s, 300 short mags. And, I guess one would be it was a quartering to shot, entered through the point of the onside shoulder, and I found it in the broken back hip.
Yep.
And that bullet did everything that I wanted it to do.
Yep, anchored your critter.
Anchored the critter. It was actually close range shot, probably about 60 yards, and poof.
Yep, absolutely.
But I've had similar performance at, like about 200, 250 yards. Actually, exact same performance with like 300s. And, bullet did the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, did we cover that?
I would also like to say that when we quote crown a winner, in this.
Oh man,
It's because we kind of have to. I mean, like we can have a tie, I suppose. That doesn't mean that that thing is the ultimate cartridge for everything that you're going to do with it, right? So exercise a little personal discretion. I had a wonderful conversation with a customer just this morning about merits and use of a given cartridge for a particular game animal. And so with respect to 6.5 V308, I'm not saying 6.5 is the best, elk cartridge on the planet. I certainly don't think so. I think that the 308 affords you a little bit more versatility in that. I think we made mention of that, like the ability to handle larger or higher weight bullets in a larger caliber certainly bodes well for the shooter who's going to be pursuant of large game. So if your cervid weighs 600 pounds or more, caliber up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
I mean, yeah, and of course, it's like, again, it's like you attached a number to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say 4. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's like everybody is like
absolutely
a little bit different with their thought process there. So, yeah, I agree. And case in point, cartridge case in point. The discussion that we're going to have today.
Oh, ammo. We forgot to talk about ammo.
Oh, yes. Never mind. Yeah, let's circle back, and then I'll get back to today. Present time.
When we began amassing the ammunition that we had here, the selections that we made for bullet weights were selected on what is very popular for those respective cartridges. So today we have a disparity between 308 and 30-06 in the lead core, especially 150 grain to 180 grain.
Yes. 150
grain soft points are a remarkably popular option on retailer shelves for 308 Winchester for like deer hunting.
Yep, and that's the same bullet that we used in
Correct.
the 6.5 versus 308.
We definitely do understand that the 180 grain bullet in the 30-06 has some more things going for it. It's also a very popular bullet weight in 30-06 because its case is larger and because it can handle that extra mass of that projectile. It's an appropriate fit, right? You could hunt deer with both, right? Also, ammo is pretty tight at the time that we had amassed all of this stuff, right? So we got what we got to try to package a good glimpse into what this isn't the final stake on the hill here as to what is the best, but it's a really good glimpse into.
Yeah, and there's different ways to, I guess, skin the old cartridge measuring cat.
Yeah.
And some of the comments, well, you're not comparing apples to apples, right? And it's like, well, fair enough.
Yes, true.
Fair enough, right? But then I'm gonna make up a hypothetical.
Yeah.
Right. You could make things, I guess, even Steven between the two. You're losing some practicality.
Yes.
For information for the masses.
Correct. I'm gonna be hand loading that ammunition, probably.
Yeah.
And I think that takes away from the spirit of the discussion. Like the gelatin component is one component of this. This is why we're also looking at the different bullet styles offering, the weight ranges, the factory available loadings at press time, like to give you a look at what a given cartridge has available for it. And like 308, for example, 110 grain to 220 grain projectiles versus a 308's 125 to 220, right? There's a few more different projectile options out there in 308 than 30-06. This should be an important consideration that a shooter makes when they're trying to pick a cartridge. Affordability was one that came up quite a bit too. Like there's going to be cost discrepancies between cartridges, no doubt about it, and their popularity on scene is going to dictate whether or not that cartridge is more accessible and affordable than the other. That doesn't necessarily mean that one is worse or better than the other. I do think, and one of the reasons why 308 beat 6.5 Creedmoor was its accessibility, or within that context.
Within that category,
right? Yeah, within that category, was its accessibility. There's way more 308 ammunition out there of all kinds of different varieties and cost structures and things like this. And that's why it had that in its bank, right? That's why it got a point there. And so within that accessibility category resides the best projectile choice for your given application, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm done with my soapboxing.
Yeah, and I don't want. Hopefully, none of this is coming off as defensive or something.
No. Well, I believe that we owe it to the people who are watching, listening, etc.
Yeah.
To kind of further explain ourselves.
Well, and because it's not like there wasn't merit to their thought process.
100% validity.
Yeah,
absolutely correct. Yeah,
and for all the people that just had nothing but positive things to say, we like you better. No, just kidding. But thank you for the very positive comments, by the way. Like it's like just over. I don't say it enough. We're being totally long-winded here. We need to kind of get to the task at hand. I know I personally don't say it enough. I read a ton of the comments. Try to respond to at least a few. Not as good about that as I should be, but man, like thank you for the comments. Like we read them. We get great podcast topics from them.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes people are just super nice. Thank you. Like it's great.
Yep.
So thanks.
Yep. And for the constructive criticism as well, very vitally important. We're going to make a better product out of it, right? Mm-hmm. Things that we miss, things that we should omit. Noted, heard.
Yeah.
On it. Promise.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Let's talk about 308 V30-06.
Yeah.
This was a really hard one to do.
Okay.
You know what, though? So 6.5, 308, because I own both. I love both. I use both. Same thing, 308 V30-06. I own both. I love both. I use both.
As much as we've talked about these cartridges, like almost ad nauseum at this point, I have a difficult time deciding between, it's interesting.
Well, what a rare opportunity we have here, Mark, to help you pick your next rifle.
Yes, this is true. Yeah. Speaking of, like you said, we crown a winner.
Yeah.
Because we have to. This one is kind of a tough pill to swallow for me.
Mm-hmm.
The 308 beat the 30-06.
It did.
By the metrics we evaluated.
It did.
In my heart of hearts, okay, because I often think of cartridges in terms of do-alls, and in an effort to not bury, I guess, my personal lead or gripe as it comes with, I guess, the outcome, I like the 30-06 more.
Not invalid, Mark. Not invalid.
Again, though, it comes back into how you're going to use it. Like, again, in the context of one cartridge to do it all, I'm going with the 06. In context of I need a cartridge to do a lot of things really well, and I want less recoil and a more shootable rifle, 308.
Yeah. So that's a great point, and I think that like your personal assessment of where value is to you in this evaluation.
Right.
You handle recoil well. I've shot with you a lot. You shoot big guns and you shoot them exceptionally well.
Thank you.
Do you notice the difference between two equally weighted 308 V30-06? Yeah, you do. But does it rattle your teeth loose to the point that you lose confidence and then thusly efficacy in the system? Probably not. And so for you, if you're looking for a rifle that would likely be undoubtedly a better solution for the one rifle, if you're not taking into consideration necessarily the ammunition availability, the versatility, or the palette of bullets offered, because they're both very close, you're going to select the rig that has the most horsepower. And I don't think that's a bad choice, right? That's an insurance policy for sure. Both of these are wildly prolific rounds, right? 30-06 has been around over a century. 308 is coming up on, 3/4 of a century, maybe a little more. They've all been there. They've all done that, right? Both offer a super viable solution. And I think, generally speaking, I'm with you mostly. I will say this. 308 Winchester is a current military cartridge in the 7.62 by 5.1 designation. man, you could flip rocks over in a lot of different places and find some kind of 308 Winchester ammunition. And that bodes well for me. I like that.
Well,
I can also get my rifles a little lighter and manageable.
Right.
And manageable.
I mean, that's where I go again, and we've talked about it before. I'm going to continue to talk about it. I am personally placing, as of late, a higher precedence in shootability to call my own shots, like essentially through the rifle scope, to be able to watch the impact on that animal. And if I am alone, to know, yep, I hit that animal right where I wanted. Possibly nope, I didn't. Possibly I missed. Yeah, I don't know. And I'll ask myself this too.
Yeah.
At a lot, if not most, practical hunting distances, and maybe I will. Maybe I'll throw a number out here. I'll say 400 and in, and that might be generous. At the end of the day, am I going to notice a difference between the two on the outcome? And I'm going to say, like, let's say identical animal. Let's pick a big animal. Let's pick a moose even.
That's a big critter.
Identical animal, identical shot placement.
Yep.
Is the more gas I get with the .6, am I actually going to see that come into play?
Maybe. It depends. No, it's a super valid point.
I can tell you which one I'm taking to the field between the two.
Oh, yeah. I know it.
How much of that is upstairs?
I think that's a huge part of it, and that's what is so wonderful about all the cartridges that we have. It's very difficult to suss it out because there are so many, but they're all pretty darn good, right? And they all will get the job done. The personal component to this is significant. I think maybe we make more categories for this, and we start. And it was like, okay, from pronghorn to mule deer, from elk to moose, and then from large carnivores to whatever, larger carnivores. Certainly, we're going to see some more delineation in the win-loss categories amongst these cartridges. And I think, so if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I need one rifle, I will hunt elk, I will hunt mule deer, I will hunt pronghorn. 30-06 is probably your better choice, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to be mule deer, whitetail, pronghorn, maybe 308. I also don't think a 30-06 is a bad choice, but maybe 308.
Right.
Yeah. We'll talk in circles about this forever.
Yeah.
Why do we do this to ourselves?
Like every time we do this, I chase my tail around.
Yep, 100%. I'll tell you why I got a 308 and why I got a 30-06.
Okay.
I got a 30-06 because I'm enamored with the cartridge and its undeniable versatility. I got a 308 because it was lighter, it was smaller, and the ammunition availability is just phenomenal. It's just the sheer volume of options out there are great. And I specifically got the 308 that I got in context here. It's Kimber Mountain Ascent. Because I wanted a rifle that weighed as light as possible, that I could still control, that I could hunt large cervids. So think like caribou, elk, maybe moose with.
Sure.
Understanding that I was towing the line of possibly anemic performance in comparison to, say, a 30-06, a 300 short mag, a 300 Win Mag.
Yeah, you're going to be more selective with the shots you take.
Yeah, but my 308 is a full pound lighter than my 30-06. It is definitely more manageable to shoot. It's more portable. Overall length is different. I love the merits and the attributes of that 308. So much so that my 30-06 has grown old and moldy. It's not moldy, it's really clean. But that's how much that cartridge has impressed me in that context.
For a lot of the hunting that you do, that's the one
100%
you're reaching for.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that today we see maybe my bias coming out a little bit.
Right. I love a light rifle for carrying, but I do like I do like a heavier rifle for shooting.
You kind of can't have both, though.
No.
Not conventionally.
But like what we're talking about here, if you maybe downsize the caliber a little bit, you can get away with a lighter rifle and still have, that shootability component be strong.
Yeah. And then muzzle brakes, too. This is something maybe we didn't touch on enough on the last one. It's like we can change the dynamic of that rifle from the shootability perspective pretty easily, right?
I've been very off brakes for a long time.
Yep.
And now I'm getting back on the brake train.
Yep.
Because I'm placing that precedence on shootability, but I still want to shoot, 300s and things like that.
Yep. And here's where all of a sudden that's kind of a moot point because, like, we have a Kimber Mountain Ascent in 30-06 here. That rifle's an absolute delight to shoot, right?
Yeah, that's not bad, right?
It recoils more than my 308, but not astoundingly, not undue. It would be a thing where it's like, okay, your daughters are getting old enough to start hunting big game, right? I think between the two, I'd probably say the 308 is going to be a little more gentle, and they'll probably notice a difference, right? Mm-hmm. But for you and I as adults, both of those rifles are extraordinarily manageable, right? Mm-hmm. And if I own both, and I'm kind of thinking about owning both because I have a problem. If I was going to look at the same parameters, I said, okay, I want a rifle that I can hang on the wing of a Super Cub and then go flying somewhere and then take it and hunt with it. 308 to 30-06 in that kind of country, and I'm speaking specifically to like Alaska, I'm bringing the 30-06, right?
Yeah.
They got bigger bears there.
Yeah.
And so the dynamic of that rifle has changed remarkably just simply by the addition of a muzzle brake. Mm-hmm. Just like we could take your 300 short mag, we could tone it down considerably. Mm-hmm. You could have a more shootable solution. You could have a more potent solution from like a lethality or a terminal ballistics standpoint. You could have a cartridge that was flatter shooting, had exhibited less drop, less drift, and by addition of a 2-ounce device on the end of your muzzle,
right,
change it completely. Even stocks. You put a rifle into a stock that's geometry mitigates recoil or distributes recoil, or you have a better hold on, or you have a more stable position when you're in the prone or when you're in seated position. Changes the entire driving experience of that rifle totally.
It does, but then it's like caveat.
Sure.
I'd say both though that the Mountain Ascent in 308 and 30-06, they don't sit like your 6.5 Creed.
No. Nope.
I mean, that thing just sits there.
Yep.
It's got that brake on it, and I'd say it's a lightweight rifle, but I wouldn't call it a flyweight rifle.
No, it's in a different weight class.
It's a very I really like what you did with that one.
Yeah, it turned out pretty slick.
It's like I look at everything with that rifle, I'm like, that's a sweet spot.
Yep. But like all of those are that's the best part about it. Is like it's very personal.
Right.
Yeah. So you're anti-brake or we're anti-brake, and then we started shooting brakes together a little bit more. And I'm like, well, it's kind of slick. Yeah, it's loud. It's concussive. It's disruptive. If you're shooting on a moon dust surface, you're not going to love it for that shot. But, boy, does it add a sweet level of control to the whole system. And I don't mind brakes. I like brakes. Yeah. Maybe you shot multi-gun long enough and you get dirt in your mouth from shooting in weird positions, and you're just okay with it.
I think you got to be, or my recommendation would be, and I don't always get there, have a good set of hearing protection that is at the ready that you can implement in the heat of the moment.
Absolutely.
Easier said than done, but not impossible.
Yeah, my ears are permanently ringing, so that'll tell you how easier said it is than done.
Right, mine are as well, and I don't care for that.
You want to do some block surgery?
We probably should, right? I'm trying to think if there's anything we need to do to cover before we cut open these blocks, which is kind of the piece de resistance, Ryan. 30-06, more penetration.
Definitely.
Interestingly enough, we're looking at the permanent wound cavities, and you look at the blocks from one side, and the 06 looks
dramatically different.
Dramatically like, oh my gosh, that look at that wound cavity compared to the 308. Then you kind of look at it from a different perspective, and you're like, oh, it's about the same. That's probably actually something that we should, circling back to some of those comments, people are, which, I mean, you see what you see, right?
Yeah, so you're looking at it like very two-dimensionally, is I guess what Mark's getting at, but a perspective change, and now suddenly that three-dimensional wound cavity looks remarkably different. And it was a much narrower margin, my opinion, from my viewpoint, between the 6.5 and the 308. They were... Like, if we didn't have the projectiles in there, like if we pulled those out, it'd be pretty tough to tell which was which.
Yeah.
It's a little more so clear between this comparison.
One thing I'd like to go back and look at, with, I guess, not contradicting, but also like, I want to go back and watch the impacts and see what the
disruption looks like.
The disruption looks like, and compare that to. But yeah, I mean, 0.6, more gas.
Definitely.
Better penetration, bigger pill.
Yep.
We're looking at, what, a 180 versus
a 150.
A 150.
And I think you would have seen a similar outcome, 150 to 150, had we the 150s to test with it. I think we're definitely stacking on velocity as we're reducing grain weight to that 30-06. And I think that added velocity is not quite over the threshold enough so that it would disrupt the bullet, either its integrity, shape, or otherwise.
No.
It'd end up short. I think we'd still out-penetrate the 308. I think we still have a more dramatic wound channel and cavity. I think that the 180, its longer length, its increased mass is just really kind of showing what that mass can do for you, and that bullet length can do for you. But the wound channels here again, like this is a very difficult test to say like, oh, it's adequate or it's not enough or it's too much, right? 308's been killing deer for a very long time, and has been doing so wonderfully. 30-06 has been doing it longer. It stands to reason that the 30-06 bringing more gas to the table, the ability to handle heavier weight projectiles is going to afford that user shot angle lenience, penetration, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not surprised, right? I'm not surprised to see the 06, even though there's a disparity in grain weight between the two projectiles, exceeding over that of the 308.
No.
Stands to reason.
Yeah, I'd say has to be as expected, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Should we... You
want to chop a block?
Let's do it.
Okay.
So these are both, like we said, it's a 180 Federal the Power Shock, and then the 150 Power Shock.
Yep. Mark, take that big giant salmon fillet knife and...
Yes. We were saying we should get a katana.
I'm...
like a little bit more dramatic.
Yeah. I'm in favor of that. Maybe just in front of the bullet and then slice that big piece of pie off.
Yeah. Oh, it's like I feel like I'm filleting meat off the bone at this point. Look at that, Ryan.
Oh,
would you hold a leg for me?
Yeah,
we'll just get that socket out.
All right, and we're back. I'm going to set this up here. This is a really nice looking thing. Cool. All right, so here we are. This is the 308 Winchester 150 grain Power Shock cup and core design. So we started, of course, at 30 caliber and 150 grains of weight. On the scale, we're at 144.1. I'm very surprised how wrong I was about how that felt. So actually significant amount of weight retention relative to how much disruption is there. And I think that's pretty cool. Here again, I think if we have the ability to introduce...
I was just about to say the same thing.
Yep.
Like bone, shoulder.
Yep. And then that varying density of tissue. Let's get a diameter measurement on this at the widest points.
I'm going to try and find, I'm saying this now as a reminder to myself, but that deer that I shot quartering to with a 180 grainer out of a 300 that went from the point of the shoulder, through the bone of the back hip.
Yep.
We need to weigh that.
That projectile?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I need to find it first, then we'll weigh it.
Remember that time that you had that perfect Federal trophy copper from that blacktail that you shot?
And then I
sucked it up
vacuumed out my car.
So we are coming up here with a expanded diameter at maximum of about 0.890. So that's like a big Ninja bullet blender going through that critter.
Yeah.
Yep. So a lot of mass retention through the permagel anyway. Expanded diameter of 0.890. Of course, as we've said this before, absolutely more than adequate to kill a whitetail, a pronghorn, and probably an elk with the right shot placement, right?
Oh, dude, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, 890 is about max across the flats there. Major disruption. And obviously not a lot of secondary fragmentation that broke off into the wound cavity. Looking at the block, and I don't know the degree of resolution that you can see it, expansion's happening pretty rapidly. We're getting probably 2 inches into the block before it's really starting to open up, and you can see that wound cavity start to definitely expand, right? And then, probably 4 inches in, we're at about the widest point, and then the bullet starts to fold back on itself a little bit, and then that cavity starts to diminish. And of course, we're losing energy as we're dumping it into the block, and that cavity is going to get smaller as it goes through there. But characteristic. That's exactly what we want.
Oh yeah,
right? That's fantastic.
That's a big mushroom.
Yeah, it is. And that's why those bullets, that projectile style, has stood so long as a absolutely effective means of take. So,
should we do the next one, Ryan?
Yep. Let's cut her out of there. Let's move some blocks here. This might be a brief intermission. Mark, Master Chef, do not cut MC Ryan's table.
I don't think I noticed earlier that big chunk of lead that came off towards the end of its travels.
So as from the top-down view, it's going to be kind of hard to see from the front view.
Yeah.
As we're looking at that cavity here, you can see there's a significant amount more fragmentation. So part of this is going to be that impact velocity, right? It's
sure.
Just the sheer amount of material that projectile has to move. You're going to have with any bullet that's not homogeneous, you're going to have some acceptable amount of material loss, right? It's just something that we've come to expect. I just had a vision of you cutting that headset cord, and that would have been
less than desirable.
Yeah,
that would have cut this podcast short.
Right? I would have. Curiously enough, we do a hunter sight in here at Vortex every fall. We actually do 2 of them now. You come down to the range and get your gun sighted in before the firearm season here in Wisconsin. We actually do one a little bit earlier too for the Western seasons. And 30-06, resoundingly popular every single year that we've done it. 308, interestingly, not as much. 25-06 was a big one last year too.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of 25-06s.
That's surprising.
There was like 4 on the line at one time.
All right, I feel like we've got most of the detritus out of there.
So, launch weight of 180.
Launch weight of 180.
Recovered weight of 162.7. So we lost more relative to total mass than we did on the 308. But we also picked up 10 inches more penetration. We've got more time in that block to have things break and tear off. We still have a higher recovered weight than the launch weight of the 308. Which this should not come as a surprise.
No. Do you think that's why those pedals are folded back more as well?
A longer time in the block. Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly. And if we look at the way that the wound channels look, they kind of, the 30-06 carries on the smaller diameter of the permanent cavity a little bit further, probably maybe 3 inches further.
Yeah.
And then, comes to rest probably 10 inches deeper. Should be expected, right? So 162.7 grains recovered. Max diameter, about 780. It's a little bit smaller in diameter, but that doesn't tell me anything.
Well, I was going to say, because it could have been...
It was
the
wider.
Same diameter as the 308, 4 inches back in the block.
It was wider at one point, right? So if I'm pushing this through a thoracic cavity and I'm digging through organs, .7875. It's about what I'm able to pull off. 788. Yeah. So at one point it was definitely ballooned out quite a bit, but it spent more time in that block and had an opportunity to force that jacket material and core material back a little bit. And again, we lost a little bit more weight percentage-wise, but not undue, right? I'd expect this to outpenetrate and outperform that 308 in that setting. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's a heavier bullet, right? Both look about identical until you get just past the major cavity. Mm-hmm. And then the .6 is going to pull away, and it should. This is like I said, no surprise to us.
Yeah, I mean, as so many things, when you're making the selection, the answer is it depends.
It does. Yeah, should we cut into the coppers?
We should.
You know, I like that copper.
I know.
We only have one copper to cut into.
That's true too. Maybe that tells the tale.
It does.
All right, let's get the blocks.
Stand by.
Well, just like that, we have the blocks that we shot into with the copper projectiles.
Dramatically different.
Dramatically different. On, I'd say, particularly the penetration front.
Indeed. Pretty much doubled the 308's penetrative capability here. So we went from a little over 16 inches to a little over 30 inches on the 308. The 30-06
has left the building.
It did. So curiously enough, and I don't know which direction I want to go with this. I'm wondering if we up the grain weight of the 308 to a 180, would it have taken similar course? Or would its velocity loss have stopped it in the block when it did? If we would have stepped down to, say, a 150...
In the .6.
No, in the 308.
Oh, in the 308.
And up the velocity, would we have a different result
than
what we did? One thing is very clear. The 30-06 freight trained through the block.
So it did. Now, an observation, again, I guess I haven't done the measuring to find out. To me, it appears, though, as even though these blocks are, I'd say pretty darn consistent.
Yep.
The block that we shot the .6 into, it looks
a little more opaque.
And it actually looks smaller to me. It looks like there's less overall material to me.
It's certainly squarer. And I think that here's an example of why gel is a very difficult medium to plant your flag in, because as consistent as it is, like you said, there's some variance going on here. Mm-hmm. They feel about the same.
Yeah.
They look different. And for the most part, we did a fair amount of gel shooting during this. Mm-hmm. We saw similar results. Shot over shot over shot over shot, right?
Yeah.
But the .6 plowed through it. You can't really see it in the video, I don't think. But for the major parts of the permanent cavity in the .6 block, because of the opacity that's there, it's highlighted. You see a lot more white fringing, and the definitions of the the definitions of the permanent wound cavity are more pronounced.
Definitely more apparent.
But they're still visible in the 308, and it looks basically like a distribution of bubbles to the top, and it's less apparent probably from the camera footage, but unquestionably the .6 is wider and longer.
Right.
And then the tracking of the two projectiles through the block, the .6 takes it away. They both observe a slight downward dip at about the same time. The impact on the 308 block was lower, which was, I think, my bad. And it takes a steep downward trajectory as we get to about the 20-inch mark or so. It starts to really go down toward the bottom of the block. And actually, I think it encountered the resistance of the table beneath it, and it kind of straightened it out a little bit. Yeah. Be interesting to reshoot that at the center of the block a couple times and see if not this particular block, a different block, to see if there'd be a different outcome.
I mean, it's not that far from the center.
No, but there's a lot of material at the top of the block, and as we speculated, I think that where the impact is and then the overall shape of the block is dictating kind of the path that it takes through target.
If you've watched the video, you saw the .6, pass through the block.
Yeah.
And when we say pass through, like it barely passed
yeah,
through.
like
we found it.
Yeah.
We found it, everybody.
It didn't quite make it to the trap.
Right.
It fell out is a good way to, like, it
Yes.
just kind of popped out and then fell about a foot behind the block in between the floor and then the angled, like, backstop. So
Saved us some cutting.
It did. Remarkably intact.
You know what's interesting, Ryan?
Yes.
When there's not an ounce of gel in the projectile that left the block that we found. And I
No.
don't think we cleaned this at all.
No, we didn't. It was still hot when we picked it up.
Yeah.
Which was cool. Well, we might as well go ahead and take a look at that thing first and foremost.
Should we weigh this one?
Yeah.
All right.
So
180 grain trophy
yeah.
copper. I mean, look at that.
She's shiny, man. The tip is visible somewhere in probably the first 4 or 5 inches of that block.
What do you think this is going to weigh?
I think it's going to weigh 178.4 grains. Well, those have a little bit bigger tip than the barns that I'm used to shooting.
I was going to say I was going to say 179, actually.
Okay. I'm going to stay with I'll say 178 nominal. Go.
Okay. We got this thing teared out.
She's fired up. 178.4 is what I said. It's 178.3.
And then it went down to... Oh,
I saw it go up.
it went down to 2.2 and it went up to 0.4, and then it has settled at 0.3.
I swear I didn't weigh this thing. So as close to 100% retention as you could get, right? So here again, expectation of copper projectiles. Like how you reoriented it. It's close enough, Mark.
And then if I press down a little bit, then I get the number that I said. Well, great. Now it says 178.4.
Let's measure that thing across flats. Widest expanded diameter. 550. 5550. Right? So, and we observed this in the last test too. The copper projectiles have a smaller expanded diameter at full expansion.
Yep.
Understanding, though, that they're doing things very differently in the way that they're going through there. One thing that is consistent throughout everything that we've tested to date is the wound cavities may not be as dramatic up front, but they carry their drama longer. The permanent wound cavities. So we're seeing a little bit taller cavities in the lead core bullets.
Right.
So we're definitely assuming that that projectile, like opening up and opening to a wider diameter, is tearing stuff up front more so, but in a shorter amount of time. Mm-hmm. And then they taper down to narrower than what the copper projectiles have done. The copper projectiles are carrying that tear much longer. And then you get out of that major cavity and you get into kind of just, we'll call it the bullet's path, but all the copper projectiles have a very distinct spiralized path that go through there. Mm-hmm. And so earlier I had said Ninja Bullet Blender. Those pedals are very robust on these projectiles, and they're just tearing the whole way through. Something notable that we've mentioned about these projectiles, though, 100-yard test, very tough bullet. There is a minimum velocity that these things work at.
Right.
And as much as I love these projectiles, you've got to respect the way that they work and where they don't. And so consult that bullet manufacturer. What is that minimum velocity to get that thing to deploy, to open up like that? And if you're breaching that threshold, you may not see the results that you've come to expect, right? But they definitely give the user a one-up on penetrative capability. Mm-hmm. And this is anecdotal at best. I've still never killed anything as dead as I have with a copper projectile. They just hit different. But you got to be mindful of how they work.
You do. And the argument comes up quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it came up in the comments on the last
Yep.
video.
Yep.
It's come up when we did our podcast on like quotation mark hunting bullets versus match bullets.
Mm-hmm.
The philosophy of you penetrate through the vitals and it's wasted energy. I get that, right?
Yep.
But also, like, if I shoot a deer through the lungs with a copper projectile,
mm-hmm.
it is going to die.
Yes.
Like, handily.
Yes.
I've shot deer at nominal ranges with copper projectiles through the lungs, and they die.
Yes.
Very handily. So, like, I get the argument.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But end result, the same, and I feel like I get... And I'm not saying just copper bullets, like a tougher bullet. I feel
bullets.
like I get the desired performance that I'm looking for.
I'm still a huge proponent.
I shoot a lot of bonded bullets, too.
I'm still a huge proponent of 2 holes in a critter versus 1. Mm-hmm. Just an opportunity for more blood out, more air in. And I like that. I'm also a structure shooter. And we've talked about that before, where I'm targeting scapulas. I'm targeting...
See, I'm, again, like...
You're not. You're a breadbasket guy.
If given the opportunity,
yeah.
I'm going to put it right through both the soft spot in both lungs, right? But, like we've talked about many times, deer, elk, whatever the animal is, they're oftentimes not broadside.
Correct.
So I just pick the angle that's going to properly track that bullet through the animal and hit all the good stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
I do my best to do that.
And so, like, I killed a pronghorn in October that was a quartering away shot. And the angle that I picked was to his off shoulder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And so my entrance was right through the heart, and then the exit was through the offside shoulder. And, of course, he didn't take a step. He just absolutely demolished him, right? My mule deer in November, that was about as perfect a broadside shot as I think I've ever been presented. Man, it looked like a picture book. And I picked shoulders. Actually ended up just a little behind him, maybe like a half an inch, and dumped him regardless. So my impact distance was close enough. I was putting a lot of gas into that thing. And he...
Oh, a lot of energy, Ryan.
Oh, yeah, a lot of energy. And he took a lurch and then landed on his nose. Typically I'm shooting structure, and typically I'm shooting a bullet like this that can get me through it and through the other side. I don't dismiss your mentality, right? Shoot breadbasket if you get it. I think that's solid. You destroy a critter's heart, it's not going to live.
They need their heart and lungs.
They do.
They're pretty important.
They do. But my ethos is right, wrong, or otherwise. I'd rather lose 2 pounds of meat than 200. So if I'm pounding a shoulder, I'd rather lose that shoulder than the whole critter. It hasn't come to pass.
I just don't. You're not risking anything by shooting something in the lungs and heart.
No, if everything is perfect, right? But I also know that they can't run if they don't have running gear. It's just a thing that sits in my head, rolls around.
Then you're just like automatically juicing that front shoulder.
And that is a concession I'm willing to make if it anchors the critter. And I shoot bullets that'll do it.
Moving along.
Fine, Mark. Did we just break up?
No.
Okay, just
I'm
checking.
not even mad. I just wanted to... It's not what we're talking about.
No, it's not what we're talking about. So anyway, 30-06 pounded through the block, and made a really pretty and characteristic wound channel through it. 308
tracked very straight.
It did. 308 did very admirable. Doubled its penetrative capability. Did take a little bit of a course deviation on the tracking, and I don't have a good answer for that. Like, what was it? The position of the projectile on the block? Was it the projectile, its velocity, its mass? Is this what I should come to expect out of it? If I would have increased its mass, would it have done something different? If I would have decreased its mass, would it have done something different? I guess more gel would tell, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But here again,
I look at this though, and like I picture this like, oh, if you had a hard quartering shot, that made it to the good stuff.
It sure did, yeah. I mean, 06 did win this category in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's obvious.
Yep. Like you said, I think overall, yes, a bigger permanent wound cavity with the 06, but and probably very, very tough to see.
Yeah.
On film or, from the camera perspective. But maybe not as pronounced as it appears on camera.
Oh, on the 308's cavity?
On the 308,
Agreed.
yeah. But, I also won't dismiss that maybe there's definitely more going on with the 06.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, yeah.
Should we pull the 308?
Chop that block.
Do you want to, Ryan? Why don't you take
Mark,
this one?
I thought you'd never ask.
I don't want to hog I don't want to hog the Victorinox.
I don't remember
model.
when you and I went fishing, we caught that fish, that one.
Yeah.
Did you fillet it or did I? I don't remember what.
I think you did.
I don't even think we need to cut the whole block apart.
Oh, that's the one that's really close to the kind of the side there.
Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to lift this little guy up. And just like that.
It's like pulling out the tenders.
Just like that. Make sure
Did you even cut a slit into the block?
No, I just used my
That looked like magic.
incredible finger strength.
Let's look at the. I want to see the pedals on that thing.
They look identical between the two projectiles.
I don't think so.
I mean, this one's curled a little bit more in, but
I think the 308 has a larger.
It does
diameter.
Yeah, it does. But remember that 06 went through more material, had more time to roll that back.
That's right.
Okay, so 165 grain trophy copper across the flats. 5A5.
Okay.
Its diameter. Launch weight 165. Mark, predictions?
Man, looking at that thing, I'm gonna say 163.
163.1. 163.7. Mark, I'm closer. I advance in The Price is Right.
You did. I was thinking about that as well. $1.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, it is a little.
163.1.
Yeah.
Okay. Or no. Wait. What was
163.7. My guess was 163.1. I was closer. He said 163 flat.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is different, but not incredibly so.
Nothing meaningful.
No. That's interesting. There's like a little witness band. Oh, you know what it is? It's a driving band. I just didn't see it initially because it is present on both projectiles. No, it's not. It's only present on the 308. It has to be driving band. Yeah.
Let me see. What are you talking about?
Well, there's like a slightly shinier band just underneath the pedal fold.
Right. Oh, you know what though?
It has
so
to
let
be,
me.
It's a relief groove for sure.
Oh, I do see what you're talking about.
Yeah. So what that groove is, in a lot of these projectiles, that groove that's cut into most of the homogeneous projectiles out there is a place where, one, we can reduce surface area contact on the lands and grooves, kind of lower the pressure a little bit, and then two, give a relief cut for material to flow into so that we don't have a dramatic depositing of copper or gilding metal alloy onto the bore of the rifle. Which in the early years of copper projectile technology, that was kind of a myth that a lot of people had, is that they'd copper foul out pretty quick. A lot of bearing surface and a soft material. These bullets, I'm mostly positive, are a gilding metal alloy. So they're a little bit harder than pure copper and really wouldn't give you much deposit.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, what is there to say about a copper projectile that leaves a 40-inch block that weighs 100 pounds and one that gets to 33 and change inches of penetration
right
through that block? Other than this is something that we expect out of a homogeneous bolt design. They're going to drive deeper. The only thing I will say again is just be mindful of how those projectiles work and keep your distances in check when you're using them, so that you don't end up with an unexpanded projectile because we simply impacted the target with not enough velocity to initiate that expansion. Lead is certainly more malleable than copper or gilding metal, and the thinner jackets on the cup and core bullet designs are certainly more lenient to a lower velocity impact.
Yeah.
So, but said this is an interesting one because we crowned the victor of this test, not the one that we're talking about the most.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess this is a great question, Mark. You need to pick one of these cartridges. It's in the running, right?
So right. So right now,
yeah,
I've got a rifle that I'm probably going to rebarrel.
Yeah,
I am.
Okay.
There, I said it. It's out there. Now we have to do it. And it's like 6.5 Creedmoor, 308, or .6 are probably.
Can I dig into this a little bit deeper?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with the rifle? Like, what's your objective?
Okay. Current thought, and you know how much I
ping pong,
a little wishy-washy, right?
Bit.
But I hunt my home state enough. I'd say primarily for blacktails.
Sure.
Which shots could be 20 yards or they could be 600 yards.
Sure.
And black bears, which I'd say shots are, probably going to be between, I'd say, 1 and 6.
Sure.
Top end. Everything perfect for those longer shots,
yep.
right?
Yep.
Wind conditions, all those things. And so there you have it. I mean, that's what I'm going to use it for, and I'm thinking about leaving it there.
Sure.
So I mean, flying with a gun isn't that big a deal, but
it's just one less thing you got to worry about.
To have a gun that I could just leave there, pack one bag, maybe it affords me an easier, more affordable way to pack a soft-sided cooler.
Sure.
To bring some meat home.
So with those parameters of function.
Oh, and it's going to be a fairly lightweight rifle.
Okay.
So I'm debating leaving the current stock on it, which is it's a lightweight gun as is.
Yeah.
Potentially getting a lighter weight.
Sure.
Rifle stock. Because it'll be a gun that's kind of a mountain rifle. I'd say primarily for the bear hunts, you're going to be toting it further.
Sure.
So then that's where the shootability comes into play too.
Sure. But as we discussed, we can change that dynamic. We can take a rifle like the .6 that lost, quote unquote, the shootability category, and we can put a muzzle brake on there.
Mm-hmm.
So with those defining parameters,
or you do the same thing with a 6.5 Creed and make it just ultra shootable like yours.
Sure. But what are you picking?
I don't know.
So we've talked about.
I have not decided.
Well,
I was thinking about it a lot yesterday, the day before, and even this morning.
So we've done 6.5, 308. We've done 308, 30-06. A lot of press time on the old 308.
Mm-hmm.
How does it stack up? If you had to make a decision before we ended this podcast, based on the testing that we've done, the numbers, figures, charts, the jello, and your parameters of function.
So based on, I'd say mostly my parameters of function right now, and I can't really explain why. I'd say, honestly, most of the why is how much I enjoyed shooting your rifle, 6.5 Creed.
No kidding. I did not.
Do not hold me to it.
I won't do it. I thought honestly you were going to pick .6. I did.
Why?
It's a very appealing cartridge. And it's what a dichotomy to talk about it in such positive light, having just ground 308.
I told you, I kind of had a problem with the outcome.
I
didn't have a problem with the outcome. It's just there's more to the story.
There is more to the story. But because the rifle can handle it, and because of the game species that you're going to be targeting, and the variability in terrain, the variability in shot distance, .6 may be the better choice there. If you told me that, I need a Wisconsin whitetail rifle, or I need then I'd say I don't think you'd tell the difference between 6.5, 308, and 30-06 from a terminal performance standpoint for those distances. Because you entered bear and elk into the chat. Did you mention elk?
I did not mention elk.
Oh, can you shoot them with a rifle there?
Yeah, I just don't rifle rifle elk hunt there
Oh, okay.
very often.
Right. Okay.
I don't even know why I elk hunt there in general, if I'm being honest.
Well, I understand.
It's not the best
I
elk
don't-
hunting.
I don't know why.
It can be good. There's people that kill elk every year.
That's true. I thought maybe you'd take the insurance policy route.
And that's what I do, but that's why I would also have a 300 Wisdom.
Okay.
Not there, you know what
Fair-
I mean? Like
no,
I'm
fair
trying to
enough.
pick one. I am trying to pick one gun to do it all,
Fair
or
enough.
do the things that I want to do.
Fair enough.
I'd be curious to ask the listeners who've listened this far.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm going to take your advice, but I'd be curious to know
10 likes, Mark gets a 30-06.
between the cartridges that I'm considering
Yeah.
at press time, because something else might enter the chat.
Yeah.
6.5 Creed, 308,
Yeah.
30-06 for I would call it a quotation mark, somewhat of a mountain,
Yep.
maybe not ultralight, but
No, it'll be a light gun, though.
it'll be a light gun
6.5 pounds.
for blacktails and black bears,
Yep.
which I think black bears at times get more credit than they deserve for how tough they are.
Sure. Yeah, that's a tough call, man.
And black bears can be very tough, and that's where shot placement comes into play too,
Yep.
though.
Absolutely.
Which I'm not a shoulder shooter for black bears. In fact, I would. Talking to people like
Is it because they're
talking to people like Ryan Lampers and other people who have shot a lot more bears
Yeah.
than I have.
Yeah.
They say it pretty much aim for the middle of the bear, soft stuff, further back than you would
Is it a
generally think. For
is it
like
a deceptive anatomy kind of thing?
I think I think that's definitely part of
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I buy that.
And the only bear that I've had to shoot multiple times, I shot in the shoulder.
No kidding.
Yeah. And it was not a big bear.
I'm gonna have to go look at some pictures of bears with their skins off.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
So knowing that,
Yeah.
knowing that, again, that I'm not going to be intentionally
Sure.
shooting for structure, at least on a broadside shot, and going back to my one buddy who was shooting a bunch of bears with a 6XC at like 400 yards
Yeah.
and closer, and having I'm probably not going to go that far,
Sure.
Yep.
Yep.
But he was shooting, his video. I saw it happen. I saw it with my own eyes because he videoed it.
It's
Got him.
we're not necessarily advocating using light cartridges
No.
for big game, but
No,
if
I
you're
know
really
that-
good.
Because I like the insurance policy.
Oh, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm a
Oh,
big
yeah.
insurance guy. Bigger is better.
Yep. Sometimes. Depends.
Depends.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So, yeah, there I'm at. I'm spinning in circles. We've spun in circles with these last two conversations.
We've dug into the gel. And I guess in this one, my hat is off to the mighty 30-06. Can't keep a good dog down.
No. But the 308 is really good, too.
Oh, yeah.
And I think here, obviously I'm being super long-winded here, but, and it'll be apparent as we do these things, too. The bullet construction can change things dramatically as well. So depending on what you're doing, you can kind of take a cartridge that maybe you would have done one thing with, and
now you can do something different with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
all right.
There it is.
There it is. Thanks for listening, everybody. 308 versus 30-06.
It depends.
It depends. The fully loaded podcast breakdown, which has still left me undecided, has things often do with me, Ryan. What's your take? What's your take on this argument? What's your take on what cartridge I should get this gun in? Asking for a friend? No, just asking for myself, actually. Until next time, shoot straight, choose your cartridges wisely. We'll catch you on the next one.
See ya.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.